It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and I am excited to introduce you to, I'm going to say friend, because I know that by the end of this, we'll be able to call ourselves friends. It's just acquaintances at this point. Texting buddies, my friend Kelsey Edwards, welcome in.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. And
You
yes,
know,
we will be friends.
yeah, and it's I know that we really started about talking about chatting a few months ago when I saw you crying online, and we'll get into that because I just was like, what is going on? Uh, but I think that I want to say that a few years ago I made the initial reach out and was like, "Oh, you're a musician, and here's the thing," and you're like, "Ah, busy. We'll get back to this at another time." And now there's a whole other part of you and what makes up you and all those things that we'll certainly get into today. So I appreciate you finally making some time and me making some time, and the stars have aligned.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it too. I do remember that we connected a few years ago, although I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember the details of it, but I'm very glad that we're able to talk about this now and that we've all been able to make the time for a great podcast experience.
Yeah. So I mean I guess just lump to it because I feel like when I say, "Hey, I'm watching you cry online," people are
Hmm.
will listen to other parts of this story, but they're going to be in the back of their mind going, "What was she crying about? What was this whole thing?" Uh
Why is she crying?
yeah, let's jump to it. A couple months ago, maybe 3 4 months ago, just doing the thing that we all do, had my social media up, and I was like, "Oh no." And I don't even know you that well, but instantly I was like, "Oh, well, I hope everything is all right. What's going on?" Tell me kind of what led up to that moment.
Yes. Why was I crying on the internet? Great question. Yeah, I a few months ago in October of 2022, I released a song called Life in a Box. And that song was kind of like my coming out, for lack of a better word, of leaving the church. It's a difficult thing to talk about because there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of, feelings about it. It's an identity. I have lived my whole life as a very devout, strong member of the church. And so when I released that song, I think it was very difficult for a lot of people, which we'll get into.
Hmm.
And there's some really positive feedback, and there was some really not so positive feedback, and a lot of people that were very hurt by my personal decisions and like confused by it and all of these things. And so some of them were very kind, and some of them were not very kind.
Hmm.
And I was really struggling for a few months there, with some of the backlash that I was getting, with some of the ways that people were talking to me, some of the people that chose to leave my life as a result of me sharing that I had left the church. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. I felt incredibly vulnerable and incredibly raw. It was already such a difficult thing for me to be open about. I didn't want to tell anybody. I almost didn't tell anybody, but I
Hmm.
felt it wasn't in line with, like, it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have had integrity. That's like struggling to find the right words. It would
Hmm.
have been a lack of integrity if I had not told people like where I was at, because everyone knew me as one particular way, and I'm no longer that way. So I felt like it was important to share. And anyways, all that to say, that's why I was crying on the internet, because I
Yeah,
was
now
sharing
I
a
feel
video.
bad. I feel bad that I framed you like this person that's just, cry. But it was. You could tell it was something that was truly impacting you very deeply, and and
Yeah.
and more and more on more than one occasion. That there was something that you were struggling through and working through. I want to give people a quick little sample of that song "Life in a Box." So maybe we'll do first verse and chorus, and
Cool.
then and we can talk about it. Obviously, we'll talk about where people can get it, but I think the lyrics are pretty spot on to the experience you were having. So let's play a little bit of that and we'll come back. So yeah, you can definitely tell, when we're talking about things like "I've got a confession, I'm not going to church," part of those lyrics. I mean, it's pretty on the nose, but then it leaves me to have some questions around your words, your lyrics, the "life in a box." Describe to me what that was to you, and what we're talking about.
Yeah. Life in a box, it came, that whole metaphor came because I feel, and I will be the first to say, I don't blame the church for anything. I'm not one of those people that's angry, that's like, oh, I hate the church. I'm not at all. Like, I loved the church for a very long time. It was a very important part of my life. a lot of who I am today is because of who I was and how I was raised. And so I hope everyone listening knows that I'm not one of those people that's here to bash the church. It's not my
Mhm.
intention at all. Having said that, there were things about it that at some point I realized were not working for me anymore.
Mhm.
And I think certain parts of my personality were amplified by some of the teachings of the gospel. I have always been like, well, I shouldn't say always been, but when I was younger, I really struggled with like perfectionism. I
Mhm.
really struggled with like scrupulosity is what it's called, like almost like religious OCD.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that word meant at the time, but now I'm able to look back and identify that's exactly what I had. Um, every part of my life and in terms of the church was very extreme. Like I had to do it all the way. I had to be the most righteous. I had to be the most holy. Like I never made mistakes, and that sounds super stupid to say, but it's true. Like I was like a very righteous, like perfect, as much as I could be.
Mhm.
And because of those like very high expectations that I felt at times were put on me, and at other times I put on myself, I felt very much boxed in. Like I had to live the way that other people wanted me to live. I had to look to somebody else for approval, look to somebody else for validation, check in with somebody else. Am I good enough? Am I doing okay? Do I get to go here? Do I get to be here? Like, am I doing enough? And
Mhm.
I felt restricted by the gender roles at times and like the expectation to be a mom or to like stay at home, things that at some point I realized I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I
Mhm.
want to be that. And so there was a lot of things with just like the expectations, the perfectionism, checking with everybody else if I was good enough, that I just felt like constantly like limited and restricted and boxed in, and like it got to a point where I was like I can't do this anymore. Like I don't know. I just, yeah, I feel like I'm in a box, and I feel like I've lived my whole life in a box of people's expectations. And that's kind of, yeah, the best analogy that I was able to come up with was just feeling boxed in.
It
So
sounds exhausting.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, when you consider, I mean, life, I think just in general, right? If we really look at it, like sometimes life just can feel exhausting, right? From the expectations to the things that we literally have to do just to be able to continue to live, to the chores, to the this, to the errands, and all that. And then you add that extra level of like, oh, I'm expected to do this, or a woman in this faith, has this expectation of what she'll do. A man is expected to do these things, and everything like that. And it does just sort of scream a lot and exhausting.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think it was that made you sort of get off the wheel or like stop spinning? Because there's a lot of people who they see it, they observe it, they're exhausted. They also can even recognize maybe within themselves some level of scrupulosity or like OCD behavior religiously, but they can't seem to step off the wheel. What do you think it
Mm.
was that allowed you to go, hold on, different ride. Let's get at
Yeah.
let's step off this.
Yeah. And again, I feel I want to reiterate that as I'm like being very open about my transition and my journey, I want to make sure no one feels threatened. I'm not trying to call anyone else's beliefs into question. I just want to
Sure.
share that this is my current belief, and this is how I feel about the world now, and this is what didn't work for me. So um yeah, I just want to be very respectful because I
Sure.
know there's many people listening that are still very faithful, and that's totally cool. Um for me, one of the biggest like shifts that happened for me. I was, like I said, it was very faithful, very like devoted. I like served a mission. I was a trainer, I was a training leader, a sister training leader, which means I was a leader in the mission for like half of my mission.
Mhm.
I I like went to BYU. I was a Relief Society president. I don't say any of that to brag, but just to give you some context as to like where I was within the context of the gospel.
Mhm.
And things started to rattle me a little bit on my mission. There were some experiences that I had where I started to question some of the doctrines of the church, and I ran into some people that like I just started to question, like, wait a second, I'm telling these people that this is the only way they can be happy, that their truest form of happiness lies within the gospel and the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And yet I'm looking at these people and they seem really genuinely happy. I'm feeling like conflicted, like I don't know that I really can add anything else to their life. There's a bunch of experiences like that. People, not wanting the Book of Mormon because they were feeling very confident with the Bible, and then me being able to observe their life and see like actually they are doing pretty good and they are happy.
Mhm.
I had taught somebody on my mission, and I was telling her about like the plan of salvation. I was telling her about baptisms for the dead, sealings, and all of these things that we do for people that, so that they can be with their families forever. And she was very confused, and she looked at me and she was like, I don't know why you would think I need any of that. Like, I believe in a God that's going to let me be with my family anyways after this life. Like,
Mhm.
why would I need a temple? Why would I need this? Why would I need that? Like, I don't believe in a God that separates families after they die. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
never thought of it that way before. Like, I guess that's true. If you believe in a God that allows families to be together, then I guess the whole temple ceiling thing is maybe not as necessary. So there are things like that some of my beliefs started to get called into question. And I was a missionary, so I was like very devout, and I was like, that's okay. Turn to preach my gospel, turn to the scriptures, talk to my mission president, rely on my faith, doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, all of these things.
Mhm.
Um, but those questions kind of lived in the back of my mind. People having miracles, whether fake or whether real, it doesn't really matter. I mean, but like having miracles being performed in certain churches without the power of the priesthood. And I was like, what? Like, that's not possible. So either that's fake or miracles are possible without the priesthood. And then I'd be like, that's okay. God recognizes faith, like faith of all kinds is valuable, even if or is valid, even if it doesn't have the priesthood. So
Sure.
I'm trying to like explain these things to myself, but at the same time, my beliefs are like, wait, what?
Mhm.
And then after that point, maybe like a couple of years, it must have been like 5 years later. I got home from my mission at the end of 2014, and then I went to Europe on a backpacking trip in 2017. And the things that had been kind of like growing under the surface, some of those questions and thoughts were really amplified when I went on this backpacking trip. And I just like I had so much freedom and so much space to just explore the world and see things around me. And at this point, I'm about 22 and 23 maybe. And I just was like, I feel like I've been living in a bubble and
Mhm.
a bubble of my beliefs, a bubble of my identity. And I was put in a completely different continent, in a completely different country where people almost didn't even believe in God. And again, some of those questions started coming back up. Like, I believe, or I've always believed that people that don't have God in their life, people that don't have the fullness of the restored gospel in their life, cannot be truly happy. Like, they have a form of happiness, it's not the full happiness.
Mhm.
And then I would like observe these people and these little families, and we stayed with this family in Amsterdam or near Amsterdam. And I just remember watching them. We were on a bike ride, and I was just like, that is joy. Like, these people are happy. They're so happy. I don't understand. How can they be this happy when they don't have what I have? Anyways, all that to say, there were experiences that happened a lot on that trip that just really kind of opened my mind, caused me to rethink some of the things that I believed, some of the ways that I identified, challenged my beliefs. And then after that, I started having a bunch of friends that were coming out as like gay, and like I realized the way that the experience they were having is they weren't able to participate fully in the gospel. Like, they weren't able to hold callings because they wanted to one of my friends wanted to date a man, so he wasn't able to hold a calling. He wasn't able to go to the temple. He wasn't able to like, participate fully in the gospel. And I really struggled with that. I was like, I don't know if I believe that. Like, I don't know if I believe in a God that doesn't let his children participate fully in his gospel just because of who they love. So there were so many things that just kind of started building up over the years, and it was
Mhm.
a very long process. Like, it was not overnight. I first started having questions in like 2013. I wouldn't say I officially like left the church until like 2019. So that's like a pretty long stretch of like years. Granted, it's my whole life up until that point. I was 25 when I finally was like, okay, so 25 years of going to church and learning and programming and conditioning and all of these beliefs that I had created. It took about 6 years for me to really be able to dismantle them and be like, okay, I think I need to try something else. So anyway, sorry, that was a very long tangent, but there's a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a process and one that, I mean, there's some part of it that seems like it would be really scary because
Yes.
you've sort of you've believed a way and this is the way and there is no other way, and then to go, "But what if there is?"
Yeah.
I I think that there are probably people that are listening to this whom, feel very similarly, if not to one of the things that you just expressed, to many of the things that you just expressed, but because they don't know what the other side looks like, or some level of fear, they just kind of, we talk within the church about putting it on the shelf. You said it was sort of in the back of your mind. We put it up on the shelf and we go, you know what? I'll figure that out later,
Hmm.
just because they can't imagine what a life would be like, or because of the experiences that have been positive that they've had within the church, the idea of stepping away feels to negate all of those experiences. So was it scary? Talk to me about that.
So scary. Yeah, it was very scary because I mean, to be fair, I think like you said, we are taught to fear that a little bit. Like the church is safe, and it is. The church is a community. It's love, it's home. It's when you've been raised in the church, it is all you've ever known. I've spent every single Sunday of my life at church for 3 hours, and I know it's two now, but
Mhm.
at the time for me, it was 3 hours, every 6 months I'm watching General Conference. Like it's an identity. It was like completely who I was. And so for me to take like that step and like dip a toe in the water on the other side was like very scary. And I did it very slowly. Like I still what it got to at the point though was like I realized I for me to stay in the church again would have been out of integrity. It would have been like not in alignment with my integrity at that point. Um, and I had to make a change. I had to try something to see if I could live more in integrity. I don't know how to say that, but you know what I
More
mean? I needed,
integritous.
yeah, more integritous, more integral, whatever. Like I needed to, that's a weird word, but I
Sure.
was not living in integrity when I was like at that point in my life. So I was like, let's just try this. Let's just dip a toe in. I had just moved to LA. And to be honest, I think that was part of what gave me the freedom, or not like moved to LA, but I just got in a place in LA. I started spending more time there. And yeah, that gave me the freedom to kind of like step away from everybody who knew me in Utah, everyone who knew me from Texas, where I grew up, like all of the old version of Kelsey that everybody knew. I was like, I'm in LA. I can create whoever I want to be. I can be whatever version of me I want to be, let me give this a shot. And so for the first little bit, I was mixing like both. Like I still went to the YSA ward here a few times, the young single adult ward.
Mhm.
I still, went to church there a couple times, found the ward where I was living, checked in there a couple times. I was like, maybe I can make this work outside of Utah. Maybe it's just a Utah thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and eventually like it just felt like my soul was like screaming for like a break. Like you just need to give this a try. You've never been on the other side. Like you said, you've never tried this. You've never once explored what could be on the other side of this. So how will you know if you want to stay if you don't just see what's over there? Something you've been afraid of, something you've been like, yes, terrified of, frankly, your whole life. So
Yeah.
so I was
Uh,
like, well, let's give it a shot.
I want to take a quick break. And when we come
Okay.
back, I'd like to pick it up right there. And maybe we start to get into some of those that are around you. They start to see a difference and what some of those reactions are. We'll come back and we'll do that in the second block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, remember you can always email us, contact at theculturalhall.com, and we'd love to hear from you, whether you think you might be a great guest, or there's a subject that you're like, oh man, you guys haven't done an episode about this ever, or not for a long time, or, I was just reading this book and you have to get the author, whatever that recommendation is, or if you just want to say, hey, you can do that. Contact at theculturalhall.com. Kelsey, I would venture to guess that since you have made this sort of public, that you have gotten some of these types of responses. Oh, life just wasn't going well for her. She didn't find the partner and now she's disenchanted with the church. Or well, you know what she wanted to do? She got caught up in the great and spacious building out in LA, and that's what happens. That's why you have to. Or she really wanted to insert whatever behavior you wanted to do. She wanted to sleep with someone. She wanted to drink something. She wanted to smoke a something. How much of that have you received as you have sort of said, yeah, pause out?
Sadly, like quite a bit. There's
Mhm.
been, I think there's a big misconception, and I remember feeling this way when I was very like devout in the church too. Is exactly what you said. Like oh man, they just got lazy. Like
Mhm.
I've been called a lazy learner, like, oh man, you just didn't want to keep it up. Like it's just easier to sin than it is to follow the commandments. Like it's you, yeah, like all those things you said, you just wanted to, sleep around or you wanted to drink or whatever it might be. And I understand because there is like when someone says, hey, this thing that everybody else believes is not for me, there is a moment where you start to feel threatened. Like, hey, like if you're trying to say this isn't true, then like now I have to jump to defend and come up and poke holes in your argument for why this doesn't work for you. You
Mhm.
know, I've
Mhm.
seen that a lot, a lot, a lot. And it's what you said, and then the other thing people will try to like um go around whatever points I've made at some point. Like I was on another podcast and I've talked about it sometimes in like TikToks and stuff like that. People will try to like find the hole in like my argument of like, well, you said this and that's not true because of this, so therefore the reason you left the church is invalid. And
Mhm.
it's like, what? like that is, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people do that where they're like, well, yeah, that was your reasoning and that's not even accurate. So yeah, it's wrong. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Well, and if you walk that out a little bit, let's say that I mean, let's put a for instance that's not accurate as far as this goes. That you left over something that wasn't accurate, and you found yourself out, and that was where you needed to be. That's where you chose for your life to be right then. I don't think that there's a or I haven't met this person whoever has had someone speak into their life and be like, the way you're doing it is wrong, and have that person be like, you know what? Thank you. Yeah, yeah, I just especially random people on the internet. Thank you, person I
Yep.
don't know, who I don't know, who I don't feel loved or cared for by. I'm gonna go ahead and just you got me there. I'm gonna stop behavior now and shift back to the thing that will make you feel more comfortable because
Yeah.
of that thing. And so that's what I think is so interesting because it isn't about a right or a wrong or about
Mm-mm.
anything like that. And one step further, the thing that drives me crazy is within the church. We believe that God can witness to people the truthfulness of things, right? I mean, you remember that you taught that
Yeah,
that I mean that's the
absolutely.
premise of everything. Joseph Smith, all
Yeah.
the things, and yet if someone says, "I'm just going to take a break," I'm going to step away. Or this thing isn't for me. Somehow we feel threatened by that, where it almost is a test of our faith, where it's like, listen, if it's true, don't worry about it. God will sort that out.
Yep.
So 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 love that person. Stop, internet trolling them and just allow them to feel loved, and then God will sort out the rest.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And that's the funniest thing to me is like I invite people who are so threatened by my decision to look inward. Why are you threatened by that? Like I am not attacking anybody. I'm
Mhm.
not telling you you're wrong. I'm not tearing down your faith. If I was, I could understand you being a little bit retaliating
Mhm.
towards me. I'm not. Like that's not my job. I don't want to do that. I support whatever somebody believes. So why are you so threatened by what I've chosen to do for my own personal life? It's like
Mhm.
maybe like again, you're feeling threatened, like, oh, if she's saying it's not true, then maybe it isn't. But no, but it is. Like, I don't know. Like you gotta look at that for yourself because if my beliefs and my decisions, like you said, should not affect you. If this
Mhm.
is true, then at the end of the day, like you're gonna be great, and whatever happens with me is my business, and God's gonna work it out with me. You know what I mean? Like, not your problem. So move on.
Yeah, I and to that point though, I think it's super easy to say that with like people we don't know on the internet, and
Yeah.
even some friends, right? And maybe even some close friends. But I think that the video that I saw, you get super emotional in and around was where you shared the song with your mom, and
Mhm.
that's a whole different thing, right? That is, talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, it's been a journey with my mom, and I know a lot of people who have left the church can understand this because there are phases of your parents or your family being able to understand and accept you and feeling very hurt and very afraid, frankly. I know my mom's biggest thing at the start was, hey, if you're not living the temple covenants, if you're not honoring your covenants, and if you're not, being the version of yourself that you need to be in the celestial kingdom with us, you're not going to be with us. And that like really scared her, was like, I'm going to be here and I don't know where you're going to be. And I understand that fear from that place of belief. Like that is her belief.
Mhm.
And so I tried to sympathize with that and understand like she's afraid of not being with me in the next life. Like that's coming from a place of love. Um, and at the same time, like I am asking for you to accept like who I am and like the version of me that I am and what I'm choosing. And so we've come to a space now where we've been able to say like, hey, we may not agree on everything, but like I am asking you to honor who I am and what I believe, and I will do the same for you. So, just as much as I want her to accept the choices that I've made and the version of me that I am, it is so important for me to do the same for her. Like honoring her beliefs, honoring what she cares about. I asked her, like, hey, how was your lesson on Sunday? How did your talk go? Like, what did you
Mhm.
talk about? She'll tell me about her lesson and the scriptures and everything like that. And it's never in like a pushing way. It's simply about sharing what she did that day, the same way that I'll share, like, cool, on Sunday, I went on a hike and then I took a yoga class. And, it's like, I'm not trying to tell you this is how you should spend your Sundays. I'm
Mhm.
just saying this is what I did. So we've come to a space now of like acceptance. But yeah, me showing that song to her in that video was actually the first time she'd ever heard the song. And um it was yeah, it was very emotional. You can see in the video. I was so scared. I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, like what is she gonna say? What is she gonna think? This is after we've already come to some like acceptance with each other, but it was so vulnerable,
Mhm.
for me. And a lot of the song is written to her, especially the bridge. Like there's a part where it's like, um I hate the, I mentioned my friends to me different makes such a bullet. Did I break all the branches on our family tree? And I want you to be proud. I know God still loves me. I hate that my freedom is making you cry. Like that section is to my mom. Like I want
Mhm.
you to be proud. I want to make her proud. So, anyways, we were crying, and it was it's on the internet. You can see it, but it's better now. So
Yeah, and a technical thing. There'll be a link to that in the show notes so people can go and kind of see that. It takes a hard way to get to it, but um you talk about the personal integrity, and sometimes if we can kind of remove ourselves from like how we think other people should live, I think that as a fundamental, and I don't want to put words into your mom's mouth, but I think most parents w- want their kids to be integritous people, right?
mhm.
And so the converse of that is if you went to your mom and you're like, "Listen, I'm not living who I am. I this feels super inauthentic. I don't have the passion for it. I don't really believe it, but I'm going through the motions."
Mhm.
Similarly, I can't imagine that your mom would be like, "Cool, well, good, keep it up because I want to make sure, like that." And
Yeah.
put in that way, it sounds silly, right? It's why you're laughing,
Mhm.
but I really do think that there is some empathy that can grow out of, well, would you want to live something in a way that felt disingenuous to how
Mhm.
you felt? No, you wouldn't. So why would you want
Mhm.
someone else to do that?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's a really perfect way to put it. And I think that's the conclusion that she's been able to come to. I am sure there's still part of her that feels sadness over it, which is
Sure.
natural. But she does a really good job now at like honoring who I am. She doesn't care like if I talk about what I did on a Sunday, or if like I used to, like if I would go to a bar with my friends, I used to like hide that and be like, "Oh yeah, we went out to dinner."
Mhm.
I didn't want her to know like I was at a bar, and now I'm like, yeah, no, we went to a bar, we had a glass of wine, not a big deal. And she's like, oh, cool. And she's so sweet actually. I used to be really anxious about like anytime I would drink coffee. I would never want to drink coffee in front of her. If I was ever at home and I got a latte, I would throw the cup away before I came home. So I
Mhm.
was like, Mom can't see that I had coffee. And for Christmas last year, the year before last, she actually bought like a Keurig coffee machine for the house in Utah, which is like so sweet. And I just like I literally cried. I was like, wow, like that was like to me a sign of like, hey, you don't have to hide. Like I accept you
Mhm.
fully for who you are. And that really meant a lot to me. So
Well, and it's a deep kind of love that sort of goes along with it, right? Accepting someone for who and where they're at.
yeah,
Always. It
yeah.
it doesn't mean that they have to be. That's the part where we miss it so much, is if I say, "It's great for you that you've done that," that somehow that speaks to my faith, that
Right.
well, and it doesn't. I can have all of the empathy in the world and feel differently than you, and it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you're right or I'm right or you're wrong or I'm wrong, but where we get so tripped up is where it's like, I can't do that because I
Yeah.
feel threatened if I do that to you.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
that's so true.
let me ask you about other family. Any other family sort of reactions worth noting?
Honestly, not so much. My family has been the least of the challenges here. Both of my brothers have actually also left the church. We all kind of left around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a gift that I did not know. We didn't ever talk about it, which is so funny, but like neither of us were like, hey, are you kind of you too? Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. It was just like, hey, I'm out. Hey, me too. Wait, I've been struggling too. Like, and so all my brothers and I were like each other's rock. Like it just, yeah, it was such a gift to like be able to have them to rely on. And then my mom, obviously, that was a challenge. My parents are divorced. My dad left the church a very long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't, it wasn't a thing with him. And all of my extended family has been pretty supportive. I know it's hard on my grandma. I only have like one living grandparent left, and she was like a little like, oh well, I'm grateful for you and I love you and whatever makes you happy. Um, I think it might have been hard for like maybe a couple of my aunts, but honestly, everyone's been so loving and supportive within my family, and that is such a gift because I know some people don't have that experience.
Yeah. Were your brother's experiences similar to yours as far as it was an integrity issue, or did they find themselves kind of finding their way out for different? And obviously, it's not your experience to tell, but I'm just curious if you all kind of walked that same path, or it was several different paths that ended in the same conclusion.
Yeah, I think it was similar in just that they realized like some of the beliefs were not aligning with them. Um, some of the big core things, I guess what it boils down to for me and for them, and again, might challenge some people's belief system. I recognize that is that I used to believe that there was only one way to be happy, and that kind of like the church had the trademark on happiness, and like living the commandments, fulfilling my covenants, and everything was the only way to be happy. I have since learned that for me, there is so many ways to be happy, and I have so much happiness and joy in the life that I live now. And I think my brothers had the same experience where they were like, hey, I don't know that this version is the only way to find joy. And um, through that like dismantling process and trying different things and, questioning certain beliefs that they, ended up at the same place. So
What and this is gonna open the can of worms, as they say. What is or has been sort of the worst, I do not recommend, 0 out of 5 stars response that you have received?
from leaving the church, like what
Hmm. Hmm.
response from people have said to me.
Yeah.
Um, I had a couple people, a family friend very close to me say like I can't be a part of your life anymore. She's since come back and apologized and like taken that back. So I do want to add that as a caveat,
Sure.
but that was really painful. That was really, really painful. Um, I
And what do you
had
what let me ask you about, and again, it's her, probably her experience, and maybe that would be an interesting kind of side episode to this whole thing. But what do you so as I've had the opportunity recently to kind of study a little bit more about boundaries, like I can sort of respect someone kind of who says, "Listen, for what I need, I'm going to need to not have you be a part of my life. I don't like it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but at least I can say, oh, that person is aware of what they need and be able to walk it out and do that."
hmm,
When she came back to you and was like, "Hey, phew, what what changed for her, or what changed with you that allowed that to be possible?"
um I I think a big thing for her, uh and I don't know if she's listening to this, but if she is, hello, I love you. But I think a big thing for her was feeling like a lot of people felt like I owed them an explanation.
Hmm.
A lot of people felt like hurt by my decision, hurt that they weren't a part of it, hurt that I didn't come to them with this transition or this like thing that I was struggling with. And I think some people, I can't speak for her directly, but I think some people felt like if you would come to me, I could probably have gotten you to stay.
Hmm.
If you had told me about this thing you were struggling with, or if you told me about this question you were having, like I could have been part in getting you to stay. And I understand that. Like it's painful to see someone you love leave the thing that you've always been a part of with them.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
you're leaving a club almost. It's like, wait, why are you leaving the club? Like you didn't even talk to me about this. Like,
Yeah.
and that's painful. And some people I understand the idea of, like you said, keeping I don't want to use the word echo chamber because that sounds negative and I don't mean it in a negative way, but
Sure.
having people that share your beliefs with you. It's like if I care about health and fitness, I want to surround myself with people who care about health and fitness because it keeps me going in that direction. So
Hmm.
if you care strongly about the gospel, you want to surround yourself with people who care about the gospel. Like I
Sure.
understand. So I think that was kind of like where she was coming from a little bit. It was like, you didn't talk to me about this. I don't understand why you would do this. And then I think after a little bit of time and me saying like how hurt I was by that, frankly, I think she was able to come to like a place of being like, hey, I can accept you for who you are and like love you for, uh, love all the versions of you, which is all I wanted to hear.
Hmm.
That's all I need. But yeah, that was pretty painful at first.
And to that point, I think it can, in a lot of these ways, deepen the relationship that you have with people, because then it's,
Mhm.
so often I don't know if you ever find yourself doing this, because of being a performer and some of those things, but where you go, would people really like me or love me or have respect for me if they knew who I really was? Like they like singy songwriting Kelsey, but would they really like, sometimes some self-doubt, or, I've got some church things or whatever. This allows you to be authentically who you are. And then the people who are in your life, those people really love you. Dare I say charity or the pure love of Christ, as opposed to, yeah, you're cool. We're doing the same thing. All right, I'll do the same thing with you.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that's so true.
Hmm.
And that's like I think that's what it really revealed to me at the end of the day. It was like exactly what you said. Who is like here because they care about me genuinely, and who is here because they care about an old version of me or like a version of me that they think I am. And when there were some negative comments or when people left my life or whatever it might be, that was the most painful thing, was like I am the same person. Anyone who knows me still knows me, like knows I'm the same person. I think I'm a better version of myself now, actually, but like at my core, I'm still me, you know? And so if you are simply not my friend anymore because of a belief that I no longer hold, wow, like
Hmm.
that sucks. Like that really sucks. But
Well,
yeah,
and it speaks to what kind of person that person is,
yeah,
quite frankly.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
i- is there anything anyone could have ever said, do you think?
To get me to stay?
Yeah.
No, because and that was an interesting thing because of people's thoughts that they maybe could have changed my mind, or
Mhm.
the reality is this was an internal journey.
Mhm.
I did not take in any anti-Mormon literature. A lot of people, that's also their thing, is like, well, you must have read the CES letter, or you must have like, dove into anti. Never did, never did. Did not touch it. Still have never read any of it, to be completely honest, because I don't care. I'm
Mhm.
not here to like disprove the church or the history or anything like that. My journey was completely internally, and it was completely internal. And I realized that this it just was I was just not in alignment with myself anymore, and there's nothing anybody could have said to change that. And I at the beginning I really did talk to people. I talked to my mission president, I talked to like my bishop. I was like, hey, I'm struggling with this, I have questions about this. And even like I had some friends that had left the church, and I went like full missionary mode on them in the middle of my own faith journey and my own faith
Mhm.
transition. And I was like fighting for the church and being like, well, let me, yeah, let me like just, unexplain that thing that you just said. I was doing what people are doing to me now. I
Mhm.
was like,
Mhm.
well, that doesn't make sense. And if I can prove this wrong, then you'll stay. And I was still studying the scriptures every day. I still fasted. I still prayed. Like my journey is not something that anybody could have stopped, because it completely was an internal shift where I just realized this isn't me anymore. And I was studying my scriptures and reading and praying all the way up until the moment where I was like, I think I need to take a break. So you can't say that I got lazy. You can't say that I gave up. You can't say that I, just like didn't want to believe anymore, because I fought for this thing till the moment I had to stop. So yeah, no, I don't think anyone could have changed it. It's just the version of me that I am now, the beliefs that I hold now, and it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I want to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll pick it right up right there. We'll come back and do that
Cool.
in the third block of the Cultural Hall. Here in the third block of the Cultural Hall, remember, we are encouraging you to be some sort of active participant in the Cultural Hall. So if you've not yet left a review wherever you get this episode, take a moment and leave a review. If you've already left a review, why not share this episode or another episode with one of your friends, family member, something like that. We'd love if you drop that link in a text message or in an email or a messenger or DM, whatever. I don't care. Just do it. And then, if there's people in your congregation or people that you want to just share with, you can say, hey, I listened to the Cultural Hall, and pique their interest. The point is, it's time for you to start doing something about it. So do one of those things, won't you please? Kelsey, I have to ask you.
Yeah.
So you don't know me, not very well anyway. So I was excommunicated from the church, and it was an interesting experience. Go and I get a letter and it says, hey, you're out. And then it was an odd experience because, one day I was in and the next day I was out. It may
Hmm.
feel like a little bit sort of technical, I guess, but did you decide, all right, May 1st, I'm out, and then May 2nd, I'm going to the bar and or you know what I'm saying? Talk to me about like the legitimate like details of what you considered in and then how you knew you were out.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I stayed very in. I would determine like my inness mentally, belief wise, were already pretty much gone. I was
Mhm.
still living the gospel, keeping the commandments, honoring my covenants until like maybe April or May, which is about when I got to LA. And I was still wearing my garments. I was still paying my tithing. I was still going to church. I was still doing all of the things, even though in my mind I was like, this doesn't feel right anymore. But a big part of that was my mom got married in January, and I really wanted to be there at the temple,
Mhm.
So even though I was just kind of rattling with like my internal things, I was like, no, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna stay in this. I'm gonna still honor and do everything I can. I want to be there for her.
Mhm.
And so I did. And then by the time like April rolled around, I was like, okay, we're gonna try this. And I wore my garments probably until like the fall. It's such a scary thing to like take those off for the first time. I I don't know. This is like really personal. Like I have never really talked about this yet, but I don't know what kind of backlash is going to come from this. But yeah, I was like still wearing my garments like the first time I ever like tried a sip of alcohol. I was like, I don't know. It's just something about that was like the hardest thing to let go. It was like, and I even carried them around in like a bag for like 2.5 years up in my closet. Like I only recently got rid of them, like maybe a year ago.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was like you're just kind of like, it's just scary. Taught to be afraid of it, and I was afraid of it. But yeah, I was out with some friends, and one of my friends that was here in LA, she'd actually left the church also, so she knew what a big deal it was for me to like be trying some of these first. And we did plan like my first latte. Like
Mhm.
we like showed up at like this little coffee shop in North Hollywood, and she was like, okay. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to order. I've never done this before. Like, what am I gonna like? What if I hate it? And she's like, let's just start with a vanilla latte, which for those of you that are unfamiliar with coffee, it's just like a little bit of like espresso and then like a lot of like milk and sugar. So
Uh-huh.
it's like a very palatable version of coffee. And I was like, it took me a minute, but I tried it and I was like, okay, yeah, this is good. I could, yeah, whatever. So that happened, and then maybe a couple weeks later, we went to a little bar, and she helped me order like my first little fruity cocktail, and I tried that, and um, this was all a part of like the dipping the toe in the water of like not going to church and like trying some of the things that I have always been taught to fear, and just experimenting. Not going to church was weird for me at first. I didn't talk about this, but I was going to the LDS church, the YSA ward, and then I started trying to like, well, maybe if I go to like some non-denominational churches, because church
Mhm.
is such a habit for me at this point, I don't know how to let go of it.
Mhm.
So then I started going to like some non-denominational churches in Hollywood and like all around LA. And I was like, let me try this. And they're like giving me Bibles and like being so kind and welcoming. And I was like, this still just doesn't feel right. I think in my soul of souls, I know I just gotta take a break. I just need to like, you know, yeah, put a break on and like find myself outside of any of this.
Mhm.
And so that kind of continued on, and I did. I think the biggest thing was stopping going to church for me to have that space and that freedom to explore. Um, and I learned that all of the things that I had been afraid of my whole life were actually like not anything I needed to be afraid of. And again, I know that challenges some people's beliefs. That's okay. For me personally, that was my journey, was that I learned that the things I was afraid of were actually not that big and scary at all. Um, so yeah.
So what then I guess I don't know. Did you have your records removed from the church?
No, my records are still in the church, which
Okay.
is it's also interesting because I've had people be like, "Oh, well, your records are still in the church, so you're still technically a member of the church." Like, I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." Like, I mean, yeah, I guess. What do you want to call me, inactive? I don't know. I don't identify with the church anymore. I don't consider myself a member, but like, yes, my records are still legally within the church. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I just wonder, like, to push just a little bit more on this, was it like when you were like, okay, I'm not doing the garment thing anymore? Was that when you thought, hey, I'm done, or when you didn't go to church anymore? I'm just, I guess I'm just sort of curious because I go, there are some people who haven't been to a church building in forever, and they're like, oh, I'm Mormon through and through and all that. And then other people who, if I'm interpreting your story, you're like, I don't identify that way anymore. And I just wonder if it's like, I'm taking these off for the last time and that's it, or I didn't go to church, one time in a month, so I'm technically inactive according to the church, and so that's when it is. I
Hmm.
wonder what that moment was for you.
It's a good question. I don't think it was like one move was like,
Okay.
I'm done. I think it was the few. I think it was when I stopped going to church and I
Hmm.
was like, this is weird. Never done this before. I've always been a church goer my whole life, you know. I stopped regularly reading my scriptures around that point too. I stopped, but again, it's like a lot of people will say, like, oh, well, it's because you stopped going to church, or it's because you stopped reading, it's because you stopped praying.
Hmm.
And I would argue back at that, no, like my beliefs were gone already. Like I had lost my like conviction of everything that I was living way before I ever stopped any of the actions.
Hmm.
Um, it just I did not believe it anymore. Way before I ever stopped doing the things that I was supposed to be doing to keep my faith. So the faith was gone, but I was still putting in the actions. And then I stopped reading. I probably like stopped praying. I stopped going to church. And then I think in maybe the summer, it was really hot. I remember I was like, it's really hot. And I was like, well, let's try this. I wore a tank top for the first time in my life. And so I think it was like a bunch of those things adding up.
Hmm. Hmm.
That maybe the garments were the final thing. But like again, I remember, yeah, I think that was probably the final thing. But yeah, it's hard to pinpoint it to any one thing because this is my whole life we're talking
Sure.
about, you know.
Sure.
It's 25 years of an identity and a belief system. It's like there wasn't just one hard moment where I was like, all right, I'm out. It was like dismantling over the first half of 2019 probably is what I would like really pinpoint it to.
Well, and there are the people that are listening to this and yelling, I'm sure, that are saying, and it's, you still have, you know, decades of years, right? So you'll listen to this again in the future and be like, oh, that's where I was then, and this is where I am now. And there's so much that existed between then and now. Do you think,
Yeah.
do you think, and you probably got this question before, do you think that you could see yourself ever coming back?
People do ask me that. I honestly no. And that again hurts people. I
Sure.
understand. But to to give you some context of like I generally what I believe now is, and you can disagree with me, I believe that like we are each capable of finding happiness. Like your happiness and whatever you believe in and have chosen it makes you happy
Hmm.
is wonderful and beautiful. And for a lot of the people, the gospel is happiness for them.
Hmm.
I now believe that like I can find happiness in a lot of ways, and I have found it. And I am truly, genuinely, this is hard for people to hear. I am much happier now than I ever was when I was like very devout in the church. And it's okay if that's not your story. If
Hmm.
the happiest version of you is the version of you that is living the gospel, honoring your covenants, and keeping the commandments, and going to the temple, if that's the happiest version of you, keep being happy, please. Like, do your happy, you know?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
happiest version of me is doing what I'm doing now, and I feel much more free, much more authentic, much more in alignment. Yeah, I truly like, I have never been so like happy right now. And so I cannot ever see myself going back to a less happy version of me
Hmm.
because those things did not make me as happy as I am currently. And I still like have a belief in a higher power. I don't identify God as the same way that I used to. The God that I believe in now is very different than the God I used to believe in. But I believe that there is a higher power. I believe that there's a source. I believe that there's a God. I'm much more like spiritual in my belief in the universe and like all of these things. And uh yeah, there's just so much more freedom and so much more authenticity in who I am now that I don't ever I have no desire to go back to the other version of me where I
Mhm.
felt restricted, boxed in, and confined. That's just me,
Sure.
just me.
Let me ask you this. There are likely people listening that know someone who is, experiencing a faith transition, experiencing a faith crisis, comes to them with questions, comes with them with concerns, doesn't feel like they're authentic, all the things, or some portion of all of the things like what we've talked about. What advice would you give that person listening to this to be able to love and to care for that person that's coming to them?
Yeah. Well, I can say one of the most important things is when I was going through that transition and anyone that I chose to talk to, it was so important to me to not feel pressured either way. I had a couple friends that had left the church and I didn't really go to them because I didn't want them to push me out. And I had a couple friends that were still very devout in the church and I didn't go to them either because I didn't want them to push to keep me in.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
was like, this is internal. Like so I went to some people who were very neutral. And anyone I talked to, I was like, I need neutral ground here. Like I need to be able to have someone to bounce off this thought, this opinion without feeling like you're saying, yeah, life is way good out here. Or like, no, like the gospel, the scriptures, the Book of Mormon. I was like, I don't want any of it. I need a sounding board for my thoughts and my feelings. So that
mhm.
would be like one thing I would say is that like wherever you are, if you're in the church, if you're out the church, like when someone's going through a very like it's tumultuous. It's like a cognitive dissonance is happening when you're being presented with information that does not match the information you've always been taking in.
Mhm.
It's really disorienting. And I would just say like honor that person's journey, honor where they are, like be a support system for them. Do not push to keep them in, do not push to keep them out. And like also let them know that your love for them is not dependent on what they believe or who they are or like where they align with religiously. Like it is that was like one of the hardest things for me was just feeling like there were people that didn't view me the same because my beliefs changed and it was like whoa, that's crazy.
Mhm.
So you can do a lot of good by letting people know like, hey, it doesn't matter what you believe, doesn't matter where you stand, I love you, I'm here for you. And if this is a path you've chosen, and I support your happiness fully. That's all I want to hear people say is like, I support whatever makes you happy. And I say the same. I support whatever makes you happy.
Do you find that people kind of, want to talk to you about it, but don't know how?
Yeah, yeah. Um, especially like my friends that are in the church still, and a lot of them felt very confused, and a lot of them wanted details. And I get it. Like I wanted to know too at a time when I would see my friends leave the church. They'd be like, whoa, 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 what's going on? Like, well, how did this happen? How did you get
Mhm.
here? Especially when all of this first came out, I had a lot of friends asking me for the details. And I told everyone who asked me, hey, I understand why you're interested. I want to remind you that faith is a personal thing.
Mhm.
Faith is a personal journey. I have been on a personal journey, and I am not at this time feeling inclined to share the details of my journey with anybody. And all I
Mhm.
would like is for your support. And that was hard for some of them, for sure. I think a lot of people wanted to know, like, what was it? What did it? What changed it?
Mhm.
And I just was like, hey, faith is personal. Just we've been taught that like if somebody else's testimony and somebody else's faith is everybody else's business, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's your business.
How much do you think of that as just that sort of innate human curiosity where it's like, "Oh, I wonder," and how much do you think it is like, "Oh, I wanna know what she did so that I don't do it, so that I don't find myself in that same situation?" I think maybe more of that applies and maybe you don't know, but if you had to speculate in the times that you asked from people that had left, what was your reason in asking?
Probably 50-50. Yeah,
Mm.
part of it was like you said, the genuine curiosity. It's like anytime you hear about like an accident on the freeway, you're like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
How did the accident happen? Like you
Mhm.
want to know the details. That's like a human thing. And then a part of it is also like you said, like how can I keep this from happening to myself? Or a lot of times, again, what I said earlier, the question comes because if I can disprove your reason for leaving, then that makes your whole story and your whole reasoning behind leaving invalid and the church is true. And
Mhm.
it's, it's like come to that, like, oh, well, you're questioning this, but if I can make you wrong, then I'm right and this is still true. So, and yeah, I get it.
So it's an interesting thing with your song because songs, works of art, I have heard described as sort of living, breathing things. In that, when you wrote it, you were at a particular part in your life, and it meant something then.
Yep.
Some time has passed, and that song still exists now, and I would imagine that some things have changed or have grown. What has changed for you with that particular song since first writing it to then sharing it to where it is today?
It's a great question. I mean, yeah, I was terrified to share that song. I wrote it, I was on the plane to Singapore for a gala for this social media thing that I was doing, and I was performing there. I was like, wow, what is my life? Like that everything is really going well for me right now. Like I was making a lot of money, like I was the more money than I'd ever made before. I was like traveling, all expenses paid on a really nice flight to Singapore where I was going to perform for a gala for people all over the world. Like I was like, wow. And then I was going to go on a solo trip to Australia after that. I was like, everything is really going my way right now.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking, I was like, but this would be really hard for somebody to accept that's within the church because there's kind of a belief that like things really go your way and you're like the ultimate version of your happiness and everything when you're living the gospel. And yet I'm
Right.
not doing any of that. And everything is really working out for me right now. So that's kind of like what prompted it. I was like on a very long flight. I listened to this song by Sasha Sloan that it was like, it's called Thank God. And I was like, she's kind of talking about the same thing. Like I'm what you'd call a sinner now, but I am still a good person. And I was like, well, that feels really, really in alignment with how I'm feeling right now, which is like a lot of people would say that the way I'm living my life, I'm wearing a dress that you can't wear garments. I'm not wearing my garments. I'm not honoring my covenants. I'm, whatever. And a lot of people would consider me like a sinner or like less worthy than I used to be. So that kind of is what prompted that whole thing. And then I sat on that song. That was in 20, that was the beginning of 2020. It was right before the pandemic. I did not release the song until October of 2022.
Mhm.
So I sat on it for like 2 years because I was like, I can't share this. Like, this is so scary. People are going to look at me differently. People are going to treat me differently. People are going to be disappointed in me. Um, and not only was I very devout in the church, I was also kind of in the public eye a little bit as like an LDS influencer on a small scale. I did projects with the church. I worked on like the world campaigns. Like I hosted, I was part of a podcast host for like a missionary podcast. I did a lot of videos with the church. I was in a lot of their campaigns, and I was very publicly known as being LDS. And
Mhm.
so it was terrifying for me to think about sharing this. And that's why I sat on it for so long, 2 years. And so finally I was like, this has to be shared. I have to share it. I got to get it out. I'm not who I am, or I'm not who I was anymore. People deserve to know that. I'm not living in alignment with who I am if I am not honest about this, especially because I have an online brand that's like your internet big sis. Like I make advice videos for teen girls. My whole thing is I want to be a positive role model in the media for young girls. But I also need to make sure that that doesn't mean I'm going to be telling them to get their personal progress, faith in God or like, do your personal progress. Like those are things I'm not going to be telling you to do that. And there might be a time where I start talking about sex and how that affects a teenager and like things they can be looking out for and like how to avoid, you know what I mean? Like those are
Mhm.
things that are important to talk about. And yet those don't align with the teachings of the gospel because the teachings of the gospel is to not have sex until you get married, which is totally fine. But there are teenagers, there are young girls in the world that are already having sex that need to be able to have somebody tell them,
Right.
guidelines or things to watch out for, like how to not be in a difficult or, hard position and you know what I mean? Like that sounds bad, but you know what I mean? Just like not, I
I
didn't
got
mean
what
it
you
like
meant.
that.
I got what you
Yeah,
meant.
not to be
Although
in
I
a bad
appreciate
position.
that.
Um, anyway,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
important to me.
because
Yeah.
we take the attitude that if we talk about it, that then everyone's going to be curious, and then sooner than later, everyone's going to be out having sex. And I think that there is
Right.
some value to have, someone saying, hey, this is, I mean, if nothing else, this is sort of why. This is why we do it, and we don't even go that far. But then also, like, this is what a toxic relationship can look like. This is what an
Yes.
abusive relationship can look
Hmm.
like. This is how you can prevent an unwanted pregnancy. This is how you
Yeah.
can keep yourself safe from a sexually transmitted disease. And we don't step into any of those things because we go, listen, if we say sex, you are gonna run out and go for it. And I just don't think it's how people work.
No, thank you. That was exactly what I was trying to say. You put it much
Yeah.
more in a better way than
Yeah.
I did. That's what I meant. Is like there are important things that need to be discussed with sex, and it's like that is maybe something that an LDS influencer or an LDS big sis would not even touch because that's not even a belief that we have. And same thing with alcohol, same thing with like drugs or anything. Like those are things that you would not ever talk about if you identify as LDS because it's something you don't touch. And yet there girls need to know like hey, like don't drink, or if you choose to drink, like do it under these circumstances, or make sure that you have a friend, or any of these things that are really important to know.
Mhm.
So anyways, that was a tangent, but it was just important to me to be honest about who I was, and that if I'm talking about big sis advice for a teenage girl, it may not look the way that you think it should look, and it may not look the way that it used to look.
Mhm.
So
Well,
so I
and I
shared
think,
the song, and yeah, all that.
I mean, there's a tremendous amount of power that comes in being honest, right? I don't know how many times I've watched on the internet when someone, and I'm like, that's not how that person really feels, or that's such a show that's so fake. I can't believe that. And so you have that, like, that trust, that integrity, that authenticity, which is a buzzword that I hate so much, but it really is. Like, I can tell when someone is being honest and lives according to what they're saying, and then I can tell when they're telling me the things so that they can have a hashtag paid ad and they wanna make some money by it, And that
Yeah.
and teenagers especially, they sniff that out pretty quick. I have to say that, it's admirable the amount of courage, I think that it takes to do something different in general, whether that's someone who is raised in a particular faith and then converts and finds himself within the walls of the LDS church. And I think it's equally as courageous and life-changing and all of those things for someone who has been within the church and then finds themselves without the church. And and I know without a question that people listening to this have appreciated your willingness to be authentic, to be able to be courageous, to talk about the experiences that you've had, and that it will improve the situation for those people who took to heart the things that you said, and to truly just love the people in their life. You know, be able
Yeah.
to hear what they're going through, and let them know, you know what? Yeah, that would be hard, and it doesn't have to be, but did you read? But did you go? Did you think about? Have you fasted this? It's just yeah, that's hard, and I'm here, and whatever I can do, and I love you still the same. There is a question that we ask everyone who steps into the cultural hall, and I would ask it of you. You get to interpret it however you'd like. But the question remains: is what is your favorite part of your faith?
I like that. My favorite part of my faith is a belief that everything is always working out for me. And that is like it's kind of like a manifestation type thing that like maybe some people would not be as familiar with, but that is a current belief that I have, which is like everything is always working out for me, no matter how it looks, no matter what's going on, like everything is happening for my highest good. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that that has allowed me like so much trust, so much like faith, so much like belief, and a lack of like I don't have to be afraid so much anymore. I don't have to feel as much anxiety as I sometimes do. It's like I believe everything is working out for me, however that looks, and I'm really grateful for that and this new identity that I have. So yeah, interpret that how you will. It might be a
Yeah.
little bit different than what most people would say, but that's what I believe. So
I love it. I love it. Kelsey, we hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body, that if you're not healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week, and that when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. All of the links of all of the different things that we talked about will be available in the show notes, including the video with Kelsey and her mom, a link to purchase her song, Why Don't Ya? And be able to listen to it in its entirety. And in the meantime, we'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of the cultural hall.